we're going to have a lot more people coming in. So in another few minutes, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. And then at 2:05, I'll give some brief announcements. And then I'm going to hand this meeting over to Dr. Susan Jones, who I see is online. Hello. Wearing a lovely scarf.
Yeah,
I had to take my pajamas off to do this meeting.
I brought my entire collection of Jane Austen books.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. And our technical genius is coming into the meeting now. Nick Clements. Without her, I couldn't do anything.
Let me turn on the light here. There, that might help. I'm going to get some tea, Jim.
And that's why we want to mute you, so that we don't hear about all the other things that are going on. Mr. Kiefer, I just muted you so we didn't hear the background conversation. It seems so rude. I hate it. But as the meeting gets big, you kind of have to do it.
Yeah, and then phones start ringing in people's houses and
dogs start barking.
dogs start barking. Yeah.
We got more people coming in. I think.
Hey, Mary. Mary Reynolds.
Nick is cheating. She is using a photograph. Mary, you're muted right now, so you would have to unmute to speak.
It's at the top. I always have to, I have to slide something down to do that. So that's why. Yes, indeed. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I hear you now.
Good.
There's Nick.
There's Nick.
Hey, Nick.
So you decide to join us live without your model photo. All right. Couple more minutes. I hope everyone's doing well with everything going on. We have 12 people here at the moment, but I do expect more people to be coming in here. 2 more minutes and we'll do some introductions. More people coming in, guys. Welcome everyone. In a couple moments, we'll do some quick introductions and we'll start our meeting. Oh, look who, the infamous Dr. Anderson is coming in.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Kathleen.
Oh, Kathleen, everyone was hoping you'd be in the meeting.
Thank you. It's good to see everyone. I'm going to be off camera today. I won't bore you with the reasons, but Norland is not looking at its best.
Norland.
I'm giving us 2 more minutes and then we'll do some quick introductions. We'll go around the Hollywood squares. You can all say your name and where you're from. We got more people coming in and then we'll start the meeting. Just bear with us a couple more minutes. Today we're going, Susan is going to lead, Dr. Susan Jones is going to lead the discussion on humor in Jane Austen's novels.
There's Sandy.
That's Sandy's top of her head.
Sandy's head.
Where are you? There you
There
are.
she is. There's Sandy.
We've got 15 people in the meeting. I suspect more are coming, but I think we're going to get started in 1 minute here. Why don't we start with Karen Sanders? Why don't you tell us where you're joining us from?
Well, I'm in Toronto. Normally when I join you, I'm in Jupiter, and it's a half-an-hour ride for me to come to West Palm. But now here I'm all the way in Toronto, and it only took a minute.
Terrific. Fantastic. And I am Elizabeth Paquette. I'm one of the co-coordinators of the Palm Beaches region with Patty Woodall. She's listed as Phil Woodall, but she's really Patty.
But it's really Patty.
And we're leading this meeting from West Palm Beach.
Yep.
Now, Mr. Kiefer. You want to unmute
Yes,
yourself?
yes, I'm unmuted. This is Mary and Jim Kiefer. We're in Bozeman, Montana.
Wow.
Fantastic. Now, how did you find out about this meeting?
Mary usually checks all the JASNA things, and I don't know where the notice came from, but she found it, and it sounded interesting.
Glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
How about you, Phil Woodall?
How about me? Okay, that's my husband's account. So, I mean, mine's on my phone, but I have more room in the den. I'm one of the co-coordinators, and many of you should have gotten a little note from me this week. Did any of you get a note from me?
Yes.
And some cards? Okay, good. Those are our new business cards, and we'll be giving more of those out in the fall. So,
Thank you.
I'm in Palm Beach
Spreading
Gardens.
our wings. Patty has had a lot of great ideas. We're spreading our wings. Nick Clements has helped us create an Instagram account. We're going to be putting more on Facebook with announcements. And now we have business cards. You can share friends who like Jane Austen about us. There's a lot of new stuff happening with new technology. Did anyone see the video I made on the Ultimate Love Token? Raise your hand.
I did.
Well, I did send it out in an email to our members of Palm Beaches region. And it's also on our Facebook page, Palm Beaches region. So I made a 20-minute video on the Ultimate Love Token in Regency, England. And we're going to do a series of videos about Jane, her books, and the culture of the time, okay? Eleanor, where are you from?
I'm from San Francisco, and I'm on the board of the JASNA Northern California region. And I think somewhere on Facebook I read about your meeting, and I love the humor in Jane Austen. I just reread Northanger Abbey and was cracked up reading it. So I thought this would be a way to get in touch with some people from other parts of the country.
Fantastic. I'm glad
Good.
you're here. All right, we're going to move on. Dula, where are you from? Hold on, wait a minute. You're not unmuted.
You're muted.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Hold
I'm
on.
from Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. How
And
did you find out about us?
our faithful leader, Marsha Hamby, sent out a notice that you, I guess, or your organization had sent out. So she passed it on, and I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. I'm glad you're with us.
Great.
Welcome.
Hi, Dula.
How about Sandy?
What?
Who are you and where are you from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I thought you know me. Sandy Hayes from Miami, Florida, and I'm a member of the Palm Beaches region. What do we call ourselves?
Yep.
Yes,
That's what it
Palm
is.
Beaches region.
Okay, good.
Great. Renee, would you like to introduce where you're from? Can you unmute? Yeah.
Yes, yes, I'm a friend of Karen Sanders, and I'm from Toronto, and she emailed me this morning and asked if I would like to join you, and I would, because I love Jane Austen.
Welcome. I'm
And I
thrilled.
just saw, just before the confinement, I saw the new film of Emma, which I found delightful.
Oh, yeah. It's a great one. Great costumes. All right. Thank you, Renee. Mary.
Mary Reynolds from Jupiter, and I think I was part of the original group when Susan and Kathleen formed, and I don't remember what year it was, but it was right after Emma came out or something like that. It was a long time ago, and I attended meetings for several years, and then life went in other directions, and now I'm back. It's good to be
And we're
back.
glad you are.
Thank
you. Susan.
Well, I'm Susan Jones, and I teach at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and Kathleen Anderson and I did set up the group. And it was around the year 2000, 2001. And we got started then, and we had a big tea with a national speaker, and just really has gone since then. We've had a lot of fun, and we've never had a treasurer or dues. I think we did have a treasurer once, but we're just so bad
Keeping
at
it
money.
simple.
Right.
And I'm glad you started this group. Marcia Hamlin.
Hi. Hi, I'm one of the 2 regional coordinators for Oregon and Southwest Washington. I'm in Portland, Oregon. And I read about you on Facebook, and I immediately told our members when you said others were welcome. So I'm just thrilled to be here and meet new Jane friends.
I'm glad you are. More the merrier. Thank you. Okay, Nick. Who are you,
I'm
Nick?
muting myself here. Hey, I'm Nick. I'm over in Jupiter Beach. I joined the JASNA South Florida last year before we turned into Palm Beaches. And I set up the Instagram page, I guess last month. And I've started sharing in a lot. I'm Monica Rhea on Facebook, so I've been like sharing our stuff in groups, and I'm glad to see some faces from all over. So social media works.
Thank you. Nick is our media expert. All right, Judy, can you unmute yourself and tell us where you're from? Unmute yourself, Judy.
All righty. Yes, I finally have video. Yeah, originally, well, I got involved. Are you talking about, because I missed the front part, are you talking about how we got involved with Jane Austen?
No, we're just introducing ourselves and where we're from, because we have people today from all over the country.
Oh, well, Lake Worth, actually.
Florida,
and Lake Charleston, yeah. So out west, yeah. So got
I'm
involved.
glad you're here, and I'm glad you've got a camera.
Yes, me too.
Okay, thanks. Julia, we can barely see you. There you are. Can you unmute yourself and tell us where you're from?
Okay, does that work? Can you hear?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. I'm Julia Pichette. I'm from Jupiter, Florida, and I work at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and I'm in the library, and I've been with the group a lot of years.
Okay, glad you're with us.
Yeah.
Arnold, now who is this? We have no picture. Who are you?
Oh, hi, Julie Arnold. I didn't know how to do my Zoom name. I'm from the Seattle area, and I found out about your meeting on Facebook. It sounded fun, so I brought my bobblehead, and I thought I'd join you.
Oh, I'm glad you did. Terrific. Welcome. Stephanie, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hey.
There she goes.
I am Stephanie Fleming, and I'm from Portland, Oregon, the Southwest Washington, Northwest Oregon chapter, and found out about this from Marcia.
It's a little difficult to hear you, by the way, Stephanie.
Is this better?
It's just not very loud, but we can hear you.
Okay. Anyway, so Marcia let our chapter know about this, and so I'm just really thankful you're opening us up this chapter. And do let us know.
Glad you're here. Michelle, where are you from? Can you unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm from Chino, California, and I'm part of the JASNA Southwest region. And I just happened to come across this event on Facebook. I think it was either posted in another Jane Austen group or it was just suggested. So I was like super excited that this was open. For people to see.
Welcome. Nina.
Yes. Hi there. I'm Nina Ruland. I'm from Camarillo, California, which is about an hour north of Los Angeles. And I'm also a member of JASNA Southwest, which covers an enormous area. But sadly, I guess they've just canceled all their meetings for the year and they're not substituting any Zoom meetings.
Oh,
So I'm really, really pleased to be able to join this one.
all right, great. Glad you're here.
The JASNA annual gathering is having a virtual symposium on juvenilia. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. And the other thing that I'm very excited about is that the Jane Austen Society, I guess in Louisville, Kentucky, next month is doing a 3-day seminar, and it's all free as well via their YouTube channel.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think you just look under Jane Austen Louisville and it'll pop up. Yeah.
Great, thanks. All right, we have 3 more people. Kathleen Anderson. Can you unmute yourself and tell everyone where you're coming from?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathleen. I taught at Palm Beach Atlantic with Dr. Jones for 20 some years. And then I was there 23. She was there 21 at the time. Last year I resigned and have moved to the Bay Area to help take care of my parents. So I very much appreciate the group, and I'm so glad that in the midst of the difficulties we're having right now, I'm able to actually join a Florida group meeting from California. But I really cherish this group and have felt very supported by you. Just to let you know, Susan Jones is going to be speaking at the online AGM. However,
Probably not, but it's
you're
Okay, she can tell us about that. Great.
Yeah, and we published a book together, Jane Austen's Guide to Thrift, and in 2018 I finally published a 12-year-long project, Jane Austen's Women, and I really appreciate how the group supported me through that journey. So welcome everybody, and nice to meet you all.
I'm glad you're here, Kathleen. Robin, would you like to introduce where you're from? You have to unmute yourself. Well, oh, here she comes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I live in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I did look into the Palm Beach chapter, but I guess you guys meet on Saturday, so I'm real excited to be here on Sunday.
Terrific, terrific. All right. And our last person, Mary Ellis. Would you like to unmute yourself and tell us where you're coming from?
Sure. Mary Elise, and I'm from the Portland, Oregon metro area, a part of Stephanie's study group. Looking forward to the topic today, and always eager to learn.
Terrific. Glad you're here. And someone just came in. Robin, do you want to tell us? You need to unmute yourself to tell us where you're from, because we have many people today from all over the country. You need to unmute yourself. There's a little button on your screen.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Where are you from, Robin?
I'm from here, West Palm Beach, Florida. I am a native.
Very good. We're glad you made it.
You look beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to keep everyone muted unless they're actually talking so that we can all hear each other better.
Okay.
Okay. We have 22 people in the meeting. That's terrific. Quick announcements. We want to do this every month. Some people have told me Sunday afternoons is not a great time. Would anyone think that it would be better like at 7 o'clock on a Monday evening? No. Okay. No. All right. Think about when you think would be a better day. I don't know if Saturday's better. I don't know if one night during the week is better at 7 o'clock, but we'll address it at the end of the meeting. Okay. Other quick announcements. Dr. Jones says she's got us dates coming in so that we can have actual face-to-face meetings starting in September at Palm Beach Atlantic University in West Palm Beach. And we will be meeting once a month like we normally do. But in addition, We are going to continue making videos to share on Facebook with everyone with different topics. And those are going to be shared with our local public library, the Mandel Library. As of this point, our local public library is still closed. So we were doing some live lectures there, but I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon. And that's all that I think I have to say. I'm going to hand this meeting over, and I'm thrilled everyone's here, to Dr. Jones. Dr. Susan Jones is a professor of English at Palm Beach Atlantic University, right here in West Palm Beach, Florida. It's all yours, Susan.
Okay. Well, I think that a lot of times when we think about Jane Austen, people tend to linger over the romance, and if we've watched the films, we think about the costumes and the houses. But I think underlying everything that Austen does is this enormously funny and ironic voice and the sense of humor that she expresses so subtly throughout all of her work. I think partly she does that because she wrote to be read aloud and to be read aloud before publication in her family. And, you know, if you're going to be reading aloud in your family, you better be entertaining because you don't want your family members to be dropping off to sleep. And I doubt that any of them ever dropped off to sleep when Jane Austen read from her works in progress. I don't think I would ever have dropped off to sleep. So I want to talk about some of the different ways that she employs humor, and then I'm going to ask you to share what you think are some of the most humorous aspects or moments or characters that Austen has used over the years. So I'm going to start with the minutia, the humor of different things that show up. And I think that the first thing that really comes to mind here is Harriet Smith and her collection of fetish objects, which she has gathered up from Mr. Elton's passage through her life, of which I think the funniest is the sticking plaster, which, you know, we can hardly imagine ourselves collecting. It's like collecting somebody's used Band-Aid. And it seems to us a kind of ridiculous thing, but she was smitten. Wasn't her fault. She wouldn't have been smitten if she hadn't been urged to it by Emma. And so eventually, as a gesture of casting him out of her life, she had to get rid of those little items that she had collected. And it's very funny, I think, to us, but very poignant at the same time, that she would have collected those things. And it shows us who she is, the kinds of things, the minute things. And if you think back to, I mean, she was basically a teenager. If you think back to when you were a teenager and perhaps you worshiped someone from afar, the things that you might be willing to collect or do. Not only does Austen have that humor connected with those items, she has a very keen eye for the way that real people feel and live from day to day as they progress, not only when they're very young, but when they get to be more mature. The second thing I want us to think about is the humor of places. There are certain places in the novels that we think are intrinsically funny. I think that the first of those would have to be Mr. Collins' parsonage. He had that, it was a gift, it was part of the living that he had from Lady Catherine de Bourgh. And so of course it had to be prepared for inspection at any time that Lady Catherine cared to come through and critique the way that the housekeeping was set up. It also was ably managed by Charlotte Lucas once she married him, as she took a really good room for herself and made sure that he took himself outside into the garden so that she could not have to put up with him 24/7. And again, I think most of us think that being married to Mr. Collins 24/7 might have been trying. And that's just the beginning of it. So think about places that are intrinsically humorous. I think there are some places in Bath that she makes to be places where People are just basically ridiculous. And it's the whole, very often, the ostentation of the way that the place is set up. And the third thing I want you to think about is characters who are intrinsically humorous. Mr. Collins, of course, is high on the list because he really has no self-consciousness. Now, she builds a backstory for him. I mean, he came from a situation where he really was not raised to be very self-conscious, and his survival is to create that persona. And that persona then, once it comes up against other people, is basically clueless. And so we find him very funny, I think. Perhaps John Thorpe is another character who is intrinsically funny and just such a jerk. And she creates him with virtually no redeeming features, which is always a recipe for being ridiculous. And perhaps some of the characters who participate in the dramatics in Mansfield Park are intrinsically ridiculous as well. And we think about them going through their parts and being happy with their costumes and very shallow. And I would say Mrs. Norris, except that she's a total horror, is also an example of a character who's very funny. You can be both horrific and funny, I think, at the same time. So the humor of characters is a part of what's going on. And then, of course, there is the irony in Jane Austen's writing. Excuse me, I need to close the door since my phone rang.
While Susan gets up, I apologize. I forgot to announce that we are recording this meeting. If anyone has an issue with their picture being on the recording, you can black your video part out. But we are only going to record it, so we put it on Facebook. So people who couldn't attend will get to be able to see the meeting. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think another thing that happens, and certainly the largest part of the humor that Austen has, lies in her area of writing with great irony. And the reader is in on the inside jokes, and the characters don't always necessarily know what's going on. I think one of the moments where that is most clear is when we have Charlotte Lucas, who moves in after Lizzie Bennet has been proposed to, and she's turned down Mr. Collins. And it's pretty clear that none of the Bennet women want, well, of course, the mother wants one of them to marry him, but the girls don't want to marry him. And while they are avoiding him and not listening to him and not wanting him to read to them, Charlotte Lucas moves in, not unlike the silent shark at the beach. And so we find that she entertains very carefully Mr. Collins, and Mr. Collins decides not to leave right away. He decides to stay on for the original amount of time he was going to be there, not because of the welcome he gets at the Bennets, but perhaps for another reason. So Austen tells us that the Bennets dine with the Lucases later on in the week. And once again, during the chief of the day, this is a quote, was Miss Lucas so kind as to listen to Mr. Collins, probably the only person who did. And when Elizabeth thanks her for her kindness, quote, Charlotte assures her of her satisfaction in being useful. Oh, yes. Then the narrator tells us even more. Charlotte's kindness extended farther than Elizabeth had any conception of. Its object was nothing less than to secure her from any return of Mr. Collins' addresses by engaging them towards herself. She didn't want him to propose again to Lizzie or whoever. She wanted his attention for herself. Such was Miss Lucas' scheme, says the narrator. And she thought if only he didn't have to go home, she was going to be very successful. But the next morning, when he's about to go home, we're told he escapes from Longbourn, where he's staying. And he escapes with admirable slyness, Austen says, and hastens to Lucas Lodge to throw himself at her feet. But she is already set out in the other direction. As he walks to her home, Charlotte perceives him from an upper window as he walks towards the house and instantly sets out to meet him accidentally in the lane. The narrator tells us Miss Lucas, who accepted him solely from the pure and disinterested desire of an establishment, cared not how soon that establishment were gained. Her parents consenting, everyone was overjoyed, and it was a speedy marriage. She wasn't going to let him escape. It was, we're told, the only honorable provision for well-educated women of small fortune, and however uncertain of giving happiness, must be their pleasantest preservative from want. Very enterprising of her to find an able and eligible candidate, however ridiculous we find him, close at hand. And I think that's one of the funniest passages that she has. And very often there is other irony when he tells how he practices those little compliments for the ladies. When he is toadying up to Catherine de Bourgh, when he makes his wife submit to everything Catherine says, standing out in the lane by her carriage, entertaining her. It's just that kind of irony that we find all the way through. Another example would be of Anne Elliot's sister, who is so constantly complaining and sick and suddenly springs to life when she gets her own way, and who often says the truth, which other people don't really want to hear, the truth about how men get to entertain themselves while women get to stay at home, the truth about other things that nobody's going to say. And yet, ironically, in her own very funny way, she tells us. And then sometimes there's humor that is a part of the plot. I'm thinking here about the end of Emma, where it's hard for Mr. Knightley to resolve what's going to happen, how he's going to marry Emma, and where he's going to live. And then suddenly we have the fortuitous great turkey robbery, where Emma's father becomes so upset that Mr. Knightley says he'll marry her and move in, and that will make him very happy, even though, of course, he really doesn't want his daughters to marry and leave him. He'd prefer for them to be there as servants. There are a lot of moments of humor. Some of them are exploited very admirably in the films that have been made. And maybe you have your favorite Mr. Collins, for example. I know I do. And sometimes the way that the instances are told. Sometimes it doesn't quite come across. I think the oddest scene that I've seen is in the current Emma, where her nose bleeds. I have no idea why anyone would ever make that particular decision in that scene of romantic love. And it just doesn't have anything to do with the plot. Doesn't seem to be integrated. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the most humorous aspect of Austen's writing, and or the most entertaining and humorous character? Where are the places that you really did laugh out loud? Who was it that said that she had just read Northanger Abbey and just laughed all the way through? Because it is so funny. And there are so many moments there. You know, not just the moment with the laundry list, but so many more. So Sandy, how about you? You have to unmute yourself.
Susan, can you share with the group your thoughts? Just one thing, Sandy. Can you share with the group your thoughts on the nudity in the new Emma movie? Where you thought maybe the director was getting that from?
Oh, you mean where he is being dressed by his valet? I think he's taking that directly from some of the satirical drawings and cartoons of the period. Certainly the next scene where she backs up and lifts her skirt up and backs up to the fireplace with her bum to the fireplace to warm up is directly from like a Crookshank satiric drawing. So I think the idea of the man not being able to dress without the valet dressing him from his skin up is where that humor is coming from. So in a sense, I thought it was an integral part of the satire of the period, taken directly from some of the satirical drawings. Some of the satirical drawings of the period are not for the prudish, shall we say.
Okay.
So, and that was what I thought about that.
I wanted to address the nosebleed scene in Emma because I think all of us thought, where did that come from? I read an interview with the director, and apparently she gets frequent nosebleeds. And she and whoever else thought that that would show the emotionality of the scene, because when she gets real emotional, the director, her nose bleeds. And so to her, that seemed perfectly normal. I think to every other person who saw it, it was just bizarre. And my opinion on the nude scene, I didn't know about the satirical drawings, but I thought they were trying to create a Colin Firth wet shirt moment where, you know, everybody would go crazy for this guy, you know, like when Colin Firth came out of the water with his shirt wet.
Okay. I actually, I mean, at first it wasn't particularly salacious. He was just naked because his valet was dressing him. So, and secondly, if you look at a lot of those satirical drawings, you'll see quite a bit.
My favorite. Okay, who's gonna say? Somebody raise their hand.
I did, Marcia. Yeah, just chiming in on the Emma nudity and nosebleeds. Yeah, I read an interview with the director too, and she talked about wanting to display the bodily aspects of love and passion and that sort of thing. And I didn't actually have a problem. Actually, her nose actually did bleed naturally. It wasn't something that was forced. And then I also agree with you about the dressing scene. It wasn't really salacious, but it did fit in really well with the humorous moments in that film where they had the servants following them around in really absurd ways. And you realized, I thought it was a really good way of showing her privilege and everything, and how she took it just completely for granted that everywhere she went, someone was just sort of shuffling along to help her out. So I thought that his dressing scene fitted in that way too.
Yeah, for sure.
One of my favorite funny scenes is also in Pride and Prejudice, where, and I love how Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet bounce off of each other when they just find out that Netherfield has been let. And Mrs. Bennet says, "Oh dear, oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune of 4,000 and 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for the girls." And Mr. Bennet says, "Well, how so? How can it affect them?" "My dear Mr. Bennet," she replies, "how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them." And Mr. Bennet says, "Oh, is that his design in settling here?" You know, he just keeps spurring her anxiety on. I think they're a great couple off of each other.
I agree, but right now I'm rereading for I don't know how many times Persuasion, and there's a section which is actually very well done in the movie too, where Anne is at the Musgroves and they're talking about each other, and they take her aside and they whisper to her and they say, "Isn't this awful?" And then she goes over and talks to somebody else, and it's all this gossiping back and forth and back and forth, and most of them are talking about Mary, her sister, who's impossible. But then Mary also gets her point. So it's very well done and very layered. I think it's very funny, very funny.
Right. Dula, I think you had your hand up, didn't you?
Okay. I think the way as whoever had just said about the play between the Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, but when he's in the library and the time that he tells Lizzie that if she marries him, he won't speak to her, you know, that contradicting the mom saying she would never speak to Lizzie again. I just love the play between him toward Miss Bennet, but yet on the other hand too, I thought it was kind of sad that here he had married a woman for whatever reason, and then didn't seem to really appreciate her. So she has both sides, the humor as well as the sadness of the marriage.
Right. He had married her because she was beautiful and young, and even though her family was in trade, he was very smitten with her. But as time went on, as sometimes happens with men who marry women because of their looks, things fall apart.
As they say, the honeymoon is over.
So things change, and perhaps I think we've all experienced this. What was so endearing when you were courting someone becomes somewhat less appealing on a day-to-day basis at home, and you just have to realize that it's part of the bargain. So,
well, and particularly since it was almost like they were isolated like we are now. So he was in the house with her so much instead of out on supervising his farm.
Right. He had a manager for
that. So anyway, thank you.
Oh, Patty.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines is when Jane is sick at Netherfield. Lizzie comes over, and Lizzie is sitting in the parlor with Mr. Bingley, his sister, and Mr. Darcy, and of course his sister wants them to take a turn around the room. And Mr. Darcy, who's so staid and dignified and grim, you know, says, well, you would either be in your confidence with one another, or I could better admire your figures from where you walk around the room. And that seems so out of culture at the time for me, but I thought it was a hilarious comment. And you see a part of him that's a little romantic at that point.
Yeah, and I think we don't realize how witty they probably were and were expected to be in the family, so that you could say something like that, and that would be a sign of a witty quip. And because we're not there, and that kind of dialogue is, you're not going to find it on most places. You'll find it in Austen because she's so sharp and so funny. And if you've read any of her letters, you know that it comes right naturally to her to be able to use that kind of satirical humor, and it is funny. Very funny.
I have some characters that I thought of that were pretty amusing to me. In Sense and Sensibility, when you have Mr. and Mrs. Palmer, and especially when you see in the 1995 film with Hugh Laurie and Imelda Staunton, and she's going on, it's like, oh, he's going to be an MP, and it's so fatiguing. And he says, it's quite shocking. And Mr. Palmer's all like, I never said anything so irrational. And she's like, Mrs. Palmer doesn't even let it bother. She just keeps going, just this very cheerful lady. And poor Mr. Palmer's just like, oh my God, it's like, how can I even continue to deal with her?
They are funny. That's a funny scene. And Nick, I think you had something you wanted to say.
I did. Actually, it was kind of related to what Patty brought up. The scene where, you know, Elizabeth is at Netherfield, and Caroline says to her, Miss Eliza Bennet, let me persuade you to follow my example and take a turn about the room. I assure you it is very refreshing after sitting so long in one attitude. Okay. So when I was a kid reading this, I always thought, how weird. Why would somebody just walk around the room? And now, since I moved to Florida as an adult during hurricane season, when we're trapped inside, and these past few months, if it's bad weather, we can't go out. I was like, oh my God, I've turned into Caroline Bingley because I'm walking around, pacing my house, and you know, and so many other things that I think we can relate to these past few months. You know, improving ourselves. You know, I've been teaching my husband to play. I don't have a pianoforte, but I have been teaching my husband to play piano these past 3 months. And you know, I've studying languages. You know, when we're reading, we're playing instruments, we're doing all of these things. It's all about self-improvement because there's nothing else to do. And it just makes you feel like it's so relatable. And it's not funny, haha, but it's kind of funny, ironic, you know, because like, oh, now I get their lives, you know, being out in the country isolated and you're upper class. So you can't go running around with, you know, the local the farmers' kids to go play. You have to do polite things, polite activities. So it's just, it was just one of those things that was just, I always thought so weird, you know, growing up. And then as moving to Florida and dealing with hurricanes and being trapped, it's like, oh, I've turned into Caroline Bingley.
Yes, now we all take a few turns around the house on a regular basis. It's just the way it is, especially since it's been raining buckets here for the last, I can't tell you how long. Yes, Mary. Can't tell whose hand that was.
Oh, in light of the fact that Jane's father was a member of the clergy, why do you think she takes so many shots at clergy people in her books? Because she really ridicules and has a lot of fun with them. I wonder how that affected her father, or if he thought that was funny, or.
Her shots are definitely aimed at the bad ones, and the ones who are, she's never talking. She never ridicules someone who is an honest clergyman, and I think you see a couple of examples in the books, and certainly she goes after Mr. Collins, who actually does the very best he can. He's a sort of example of an evangelical clergyman of the period, but he's so zealous hunting for other people's sins that it gets to be a little more than we can handle. And then you have the clergyman who dies after eating too many clerical dinners of dyspepsia or apoplexy or some combination thereof. And you have other examples of people who want to go into clergy and are absolutely without morals. You have Mr. Elton, who's just silly and a status hunter. So I think her father probably appreciated that humor, because he certainly would have been aware in a lifetime of being a clergyman that there were some pair of people who were not exactly really good shepherds. They were there for some other reason.
I loved it when Wickham said he was meant for the clergy.
Oh, yeah. He'd have made an admirable clergyman, I'm sure. Judy.
Funny you touched on that, because I thought that too, because I always look for things that are spiritual within her writing because of her father, and poking fun at clergymen, I thought, you know, really was surprising to me all along. But it is the irony of it, and you know, the way she positions it that makes fun, like as Susan was saying, you know, there's a point to it, and we can appreciate that fact. But her brothers too, weren't a couple of them clergy?
They were,
you know, in the clergy too. So that's what I thought was ironic. And it's funny, I just want to say too that I think of her more as ironic than funny, although there are funny instances.
Right.
She just reminds me of somebody sitting back and taking a look at life and just pointing out all the foibles satirically. But, you know.
Right. Her humor come from the irony, I think.
Yeah, from the irony, you know, of it all. But she is, and the relationships, the turn of Darcy and all of them, the relationships that we have, the irony of all that as we go through. But she is amazing in her writing to pull that off for so long, to be appealing to believe in now. So, but, yeah, that was my thought on that.
Well, I think of Mrs. Norris, and she starts out talking about things like Sunday traveling. I mean, she's punctilious about all of these little details, and yet as an exemplar of a clergyman's wife, she's a horror. She's mean-spirited and selfish,
Yeah.
and everything that you would not want to have a close family.
No, that's for sure.
And she eggs on her nieces to extremes of self-indulgence that end really badly. And then, so yeah, Elizabeth, you were.
I thought another funny scene from Northanger Abbey is when Captain Tilney thinks that Catherine has money. And he's, oh my God, he's just sucking up to her. And I love how he's describing his dining room and the dimensions. Of course, that all changes as soon as he finds out she doesn't have any money.
Right. He no longer cares.
A lot of the I found a lot of the comedy in her novels is when she exaggerates characters and they become funny then. And it's funny to the reader because sometimes you see yourself in some of these characters.
Although we hope not.
Can I chime in a minute on the clergy point?
Right.
I'm glad you all raised that. I think it's interesting that one indicator that Sir Thomas Bertram is redeemable is that he gives a sincere speech to Henry Crawford about how there's really nothing more noble or important one can do than be a devout clergyman who cares for the people of his community. And on the surface, it seems a little out of character, but by the end of Mansfield Park, Sir Thomas is redeemed. And he's returned to his family with a renewed and maybe a new sense of the Fanny Price values. So that's kind of a startling moment. And of course, Edmund is going to be a good clergyman, and that's precisely because he learns humility. Similarly, in Sense and Sensibility, you have Edward, who, although he starts out modest, he learns what true humility is when he realizes how he's used his privilege to hurt Eleanor by fooling himself that she has no feelings for him. By the end, he defers to her opinions the way Edmund defers to Fanny. So I also find it very intriguing that the best clergy characters tend to be the ones who listen to good women as well. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, at least one scholar claims that James Austen was not the most wonderful of Austen's brothers, and that when he took over Mr. Austen's parish living, Jane herself was not overpleased with the fact that, you know, as she commented, I think somewhere, part of the family's benefiting at the expense of the other. So, you know, some think that Sense and Sensibilities, John and Fanny, the sort of vultures descending to consume all, are based on James Austen and his wife.
Well, they were turfed out of the living, so, and they had to sell all of their possessions. So that couldn't have been a very satisfactory situation for almost anybody. Sandy.
That brings up, I think that's one of the funniest scenes in all of Austen when Fanny and, I can't think of his name now, the brother, are deciding how much money they're going to give the girls, and she works him down. I mean, that is, it's sad, but it's just hilarious.
Because some of the characters that are funny are the characters we just love to hate. And Fanny is one of them. Mrs. Norris is another one. And maybe you can think of some others that perhaps.
Catherine de Bourgh.
Catherine de Bourgh, perhaps. Dula, were you going to say something?
I was going to say something, but I wanted to go on the Sense and Sensibility, the scene where they keep talking down. It is, I think it's one of the funniest scenes in any of her books, but it also is exactly what the story is about. It's exactly saying this is where Eleanor and Marianne are. and they are at the mercy of these people. And Jane puts together a very funny scene that is really very sad, because it shows you where Eleanor and Marianne are going to wind up, and you're laughing at it, but so that's why she's so brilliant, in my opinion. It just, she really gets right to the heart of it with humor.
Yeah, but I was going to say that with Mr. Elliot and his buffoonery, he's so egotistical that I just kind of want to shake him, but yet he handles it so well. Or she handles the situation so well, and then has such an opposite with the Admiral as he moves into the Elliot home, as how one is so ridiculous and the other one is so grounded.
Right. Right. The Admiral has the natural nobility about him, and Mr. Elliot is given the mirror as a prop, so that there are so many mirrors around that the Admiral can hardly stand it.
And yes. It'd be hard to live with a man who had to constantly look at himself in the mirror. At least I would think.
Although you see them.
How his wife really handled it, or if he was that supercilious whenever she was still alive, because it seems as though she was the leader of the two.
Right.
One with sense. So wealth doesn't necessarily mean intelligence.
True enough. I always think of those mirrors as the parakeet effect. If you've ever had a parakeet, you know, they like to look at themselves in the mirror and go, pretty boy, pretty boy. And sometimes we've had some rather handsome colleagues, and you can see them looking at themselves reflected in the glass in a door when they go by. And they just aren't even aware that they're doing it. And just think of it as the parakeet effect. But anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well, how many of us, whenever we were out and around, would sometimes look at ourselves in store windows as we were walking down the sidewalk?
Yes,
and so it wasn't to the degree of Mr. Elliot.
No, not
at
at
least.
all. I'd like to think not. You do have to check your hem from time to time.
True.
Elizabeth.
I'm only looking in the mirror to see how fat I am, by the way. But anyway, you know, when actually Mr. Elton, when he proposes to Emma in the carriage, to me is almost like becoming Mr. Collins for a moment. And I thought that was a humorous scene too. And she's so surprised by it. She's clueless.
Yeah, if it weren't just such a horror, I mean, the potential for sexual assault is there, which is, you know, why they shouldn't have been alone. There's that frisson that you're on the border of something very humorous, and because he's drunk, something that could be very, very serious. And I'm never quite sure how to feel about that scene, because it is both funny at the one hand, and you're just on the edge of something.
Though I think Emma could take care of herself.
Yes. Theoretically, but she's very young.
Yeah. And also, it's sad, but it's humorous, where in Mansfield Park, the lady of the house is always laying on the sofa with Pug. It's funny, but it's also sad. Kind of a life wasted.
Right. Well, of course, there are the indications that she was on some kind of opiate. So for who knows, you know, she had those children, and it's possible that that was the result of her, you know, having had to deal with the after pains of childbirth. Hard to tell. Well, Mansfield Park is probably the novel that you probably think of least when you think about humorous moments. There are some humorous moments there. Certainly all of the strange characters in the putting on of that really truly inappropriate play are funny. But I wonder why, you know, there's a different feeling about Mansfield Park. And it has a different purpose. So I wonder why we think that perhaps there were some kind of funny characters, but I don't know. Why is there less humor, less of that irony there? Why the more serious focus, I think, when we get to Mansfield Park?
And it does seem that her funnier novels were more popular and still are more popular.
Well, I like to read Mansfield Park. There's something admirable about Fanny Price, even though she's not as appealing a character as some of the others. I had a student who once wrote that she represented the soul of the novel. So she was different, really, in many cases from the other heroines who were in romantic comedy. She has something else to say. And she's an agent of reform, which is often not funny at all. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Fanny and Catherine Moore are my least favorite heroines. I just feel like these are two young girls that know nothing, been nowhere, very naive. And I can't figure out why everyone wants, I can't figure out why everyone's sort of cozying up, the men are cozying up to Fanny. I just don't see what they see, except that she's knows nothing.
Well, that can be quite appealing for a man.
Perhaps. They feel they know more.
They feel they can teach her. Always appealing. But I mean, none of them are really, until the end, when her value is truly appreciated, none of them, well, I never did figure out why Henry wanted to marry her. She was the least likely person to attract him.
I have a love-hate relationship with some of these ridiculous characters because I feel like they're funny in that they're entertaining, but then, we like to laugh at them being ridiculous, but it stops being funny when they are doing active harm. Like Mr. Collins, he kind of went too far, with some of his statements and that letter. And Sir Walter Elliot is another good example. I mean, yeah, he was ridiculous, like he was cock of the walk, I'm always puffing himself up, but he was also driving his family into financial ruin, just to maintain this lifestyle. So I have a love-hate relationship with some of these ridiculous, funny characters.
Marcia.
I actually think that's the genius of Jane Austen, is that her characters are multifaceted, and a character isn't a one note. And so you're going to laugh at somebody, and then you're going to cringe at them in the next minute, and you're going to see them in all of their different dimensions. So I don't have a problem with it. I think it's genius.
Yeah. Elizabeth Bennet gets sucked in by a liar, and then she discovers that she was wrong, just as some other characters were wrong in their judgments. And Emma, I don't think there's anything more horrific than the scene where she becomes insulting and where she's pushed by, once again, another really kind of venal character into insulting someone who is a powerless individual in the community, for which she's called to account by Mr. Knightley, and rightly so. But she just goes over what I think she would normally do. And in many ways, those characters, I think, are catalysts, but they also represent, I mean, which one of us hasn't done something really stupid that we shrink about when we think it over later on. I think that's a reflection of her genius, for sure. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, that scene at Box Hill when she insults Miss Bates, that is really chilling. That's, I think, one of the most chilling moments in any of the novels for me. that especially the heroine is the one being so cruel. And we haven't mentioned Mr. Woodhouse. I think that he's quite humorous, too, with his diet and not wanting guests to eat too much. And this new movie, Emma, with the fire screen was just hysterical. Perfect social distancing. I just loved it.
I especially loved when he managed to get the fire screens between him and the young couple. Well, not so young in one of them, but where he built up the screens and then they could schmooze without him looking on. I thought that, to me, that was just one of the funniest scenes in that film. And the screens are getting built up higher and higher and more ridiculous. That just made me laugh out loud. And then they're left by themselves.
You can't even see him anymore. I loved it.
Can't see them. He's not a very good chaperone at that point. Yeah, Marcia. Marcia, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Just talking to myself. Sorry about that. Northanger Abbey. Two things that I love about it. One is, speaking of how funny it is, when I was reading it for the first time, knowing that it was the first novel that she wrote, even though it didn't get published till later, I was blown away in chapter 5 when she starts defending the novel. And I realized this whole novel is very meta in that she's like talking about the types of the heroine and the this and the that. She goes, our heroine will do this. And so she's like, she's writing a story that in itself is a wonderful story, but then she's got this whole other layer where she's analyzing the novel and its form and tropes. And I was blown away. And this was when she was really young. So that was one of the things I wanted to say about Northanger. And then the other thing, another character we haven't discussed that's kind of awful but hilarious is Isabella and all of her self-delusions about herself. And one of the things, I actually love Catherine Morland, by the way, because I think she grows. I think she's young and she's naive. She's been surrounded only by love and only brought up to trust people. And then she's had to go off into the big city and learn really horrible truths about, you know, human nature and the bad sides of it. And the scene where she's reading Isabella's letter and completely seeing through it was, I just thought showed, you know, her maturity and how much she had grown. That's all.
I think the thing I liked about her was the story of her childhood, where she grew up running around with her brothers and, you know, what we would consider a kind of a normal, but they would have considered kind of outlandish upbringing, and where her mother really didn't stick her in corsets and make her sit around all the time, as many of the other young women of the period were raised. And perhaps it's that gives her the freshness that she has. She's not jaded like some of the other characters that we encounter. And perhaps the resilience to deal with the things that, I mean, she got chucked out of the house and she had to travel by herself. I mean, it's just really horrific experiences for a person of her age and period. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Well, just as someone mentioned that, you know, you mentioned actually, Susan, that Isabella had a lot of self-delusions. So in a way did Lucy Steele, a very ambitious young woman. But that whole scene where she goes to the Mrs. Farrar's to hopefully, was she going to divulge to her engagement to her son? And she throws her out of the house. But she must have thought she was going to accept it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think Lucy was a whole lot. Lucy probably had a backup plan.
And she did, yes. She ended up marrying the brother.
Right. She always had a backup plan. Lucy is a really interesting character for that point of view. She has in the book that Kathleen and I wrote, she became the our model for sort of as an investment broker. if she were a modern woman today, because she has that cleverness of dealing with multiple facets. And also she's, you know, we're told by several people that she knows how to take care of money. And even for a woman who is not affluent, she knows how to save and she knows how to deal with finances. And I think that that's one of the things that for me makes her interesting, although, you know, once again, it's a character that makes you cringe. That the things that she does to Eleanor are really despicable. She ceases being funny when she's messing with Eleanor, whom I like very much.
No, but I'm piggybacking off of Sense and Sensibility. Another character that I just remembered who was kind of funny is Mrs. Jennings.
Oh, I love her.
And it's just so funny because, I mean, in a way, I was kind of annoyed at her when I first read Sense and Sensibility when she's trying to figure out who Eleanor likes. And Margaret is just kind of like going with it. Oh, yeah, he has no profession and his name begins with an F. And I'm like, oh my God, Margaret, stop. Like, please stop. But then, like, Mrs. Jennings really grew on me. Like, at first she was, oh, she's just a busybody. She's trying to marry off the Dashwood girls because her daughters are already married. But then when Willoughby bails on Marianne, and she's totally on Marianne's side. And then when the whole Lucy and Edward thing blows up in everybody's face, she's totally on Edward's side and like praises him for being so loyal, even though she doesn't know that Eleanor likes Edward as well. So it's like, so I just really like Mrs. Jennings by the end of Sense and Sensibility. She's fun.
I love her as a character, and I love her because she's always portrayed as being a person of traditional girth, I guess you would say. She's not a svelte character. She's as fashionable as any rich woman who's vastly overweight can be, but she has a heart of gold. And I think those are the things that I really, really like about her, is that because so many of the other characters, I mean, Fanny, oh my goodness. Fanny, the bad sister, is, I mean, you can never picture her as anything but stick thin, because there's no place for fat to stick on that meanness. Yeah, Karen.
One character that you haven't mentioned is Anne Steele, Lucy's sister, who is in there purely for comedy, because people are always joking with her about the doctor, and she's interested in him and where is he, and she's been there purely for comedy.
Yeah, she doesn't have much going for her. She doesn't have intellect. She's not cunning like her sister. She's just sort of just there. You're right. As a kind of, she's a foil really for her sister. Barbara.
I was just thinking that just gives me a whole idea of the place setters in some of these books, because let's think of Kitty Bennett. I mean, why is she in there? The same, you know, as a place setter. I mean, is it just to make things symmetrical? I don't know. I've never quite figured that out, but I'll ask you.
Well, I don't know. What do you think? She is there to represent an opposition, but also to create a dilemma. I mean, there has to be a crisis, and she's it.
Oh, sorry, can I put in my input for Barbara, just how I think how Kitty fits in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So since we see how Kitty pretty much follows Lydia wherever she goes, I think with having Kitty almost being exactly like Lydia, and then at the end kind of being guided by Jane and Lizzie to better society and not being as silly, I think it just shows like, well, no one is completely hopeless in bringing back from the brink, I guess. So to me, Kitty seems like, oh, not everyone in the Bennett family is going to fall into the same predicament that Lydia has. Like, Kitty can be saved, so to speak. Kitty can be turned into a proper person, at least for that time. At least that's how I see what Kitty's role is.
Right. Kitty and Lydia are part of the crisis, and then Kitty can be redeemed, but Lydia's Lydia. Barbara.
And yet, poor Kitty. No, everyone's writing all these books about Mary Bennett, with making her a more interesting person. No one cares about Kitty. That's for you to write. That's your next book, Susan.
Maybe. Patty.
this is a minor character, but I think of Mrs. Allen and clothes. You know, oh, we cannot go anywhere until we have a whole new wardrobe. Now she comes with all these trunks and everything, but she has to go get new clothes. And then the little interchange with Mr. Tilney about the muslin. I just thought that was a really funny scene, that he knew all about it and that impressed her, but they couldn't have much of a conversation because they had to be introduced. And then once they were introduced, then he gets to meet Catherine and everything. But I like Mrs. Allen because she's just such a proper lady, and muslin is just such an important subject to her.
Right. She's a good deal like Mrs. Jennings, but a little softer. She's a person who cares about other people, who does things for other people, who genuinely wants other people to get connected.
And she wants to protect Catherine, and she sees where Catherine's getting a little bit out of control, and she really cares about her, I think.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Now that we're talking about it, there seem to be so many humorous characters. I mean, I think of Isabella's brother, the big oaf in Mansfield Park, and granted he's dangerous behind his carriage, but he goes on and on about his carriage, the poor thing. He's trying to be a manly man. And even a similar character in Mansfield Park that marries Maria, what was his name? He owns Rosings, was it Rosings? No, he owned, he was looking for advice on landscaping for an estate of his. And he and Maria get married, and
Mr.
Rushworth, that's right. You know, he seems a little odd sometimes too.
Well, yes.
He's got a share of strange male characters.
Well, I think he's a young man of privilege, but not much taste. And so he has to depend on other people to create taste for him. And that kind of dependence leads you into being ridiculous, where you're going to cut down swaths of ancient trees to build the latest vista. And it's also, it also represents a sets of values coming into a collision. And clearly Austen doesn't like his. Well, what do you think is the funniest scene in all the Austen novels?
Really, for me,
I think
oh, I'm sorry. Really, anything for me with Mr. Collins, just any scene. And I think one of the funniest ones for me is when he first comes to Longbourn and he's having dinner with the family, and Mr. Bennet is like deliberately trying to expose him, like, yes, I know you're an insensible man, and I'm just gonna sort of broadcast that to the family, and if they pick that up on it or not, who knows? And then of course, when he asks about, oh, so do you actually create compliments like off the cuff, or do you just kind of store them up? And Mr. Collins like seriously takes this into serious consideration. He's like, you know, sometimes I make them up like on the cuff, but other times I like to collect them and then give compliments out at the right moment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Mr. Collins, no, no.
Because the ladies like them so much.
Yeah.
And then we all roll our eyes.
I think the funniest scene is the one that Kathleen mentioned when Mr. Bennet says, you must from here forward be a stranger to one of your parents because, you know, I will not speak to you if you do marry Mr. Collins. That is just priceless.
It is funny. It's a really funny moment. And that's because it's such a clever quip. That's a wit. And we don't think of him as being necessarily a witty man, but he is. He's very witty there, and I think perhaps that may be a way in which we think of the way that Mrs. Bennet might have been attracted to him when he was a young man, that he was witty, she was not, and before he turned his wit on her, when he was still smitten with her, it probably appeared to be very appealing characteristic. Other scenes you think are the funniest scene?
Well, I do think Pride and Prejudice is the funniest of all the books.
There are
But
lots of moments for us
yeah.
here. Lots of moments. Eleanor.
I like the scene in Northanger Abbey where Catherine and Henry are in the carriage, and he's explaining to her about what she's going to find in the Abbey, and she's just, you know, she's just all excited. What? And then finally she realizes that he's pulling her leg a little bit. And then of course it leads up to what actually happens to her when she's in her room and starts, you know, looking in all the drawers and stuff. But I thought that was very funny, and he's just a very witty character.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes, he is. And that's one of his appeals. I mean, he's once again, a nice guy, but very witty, especially something that she probably has not encountered. Her family seemed very honest, but not given to witty repartee, especially where there's so many young siblings. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on humor. And I just, it's one of the things I think that deepens and makes our enjoyment of Jane Austen's work ever more enduring, because there are serious moments and serious topics, and then underpinning it all is this wonderful good nature and humor, and sometimes characters that we find very funny but loathsome at the same time. And it's just because of the range of her ability to create scenes and dialogue and people and plots that we come to this deep appreciation of her, which keeps us reading these books again and again and again and finding something new every time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. That was terrific. Thank you. And thank you for everyone's insight.
Thanks for participating.
Yeah, it was great to have people from all around the country. A couple points on business. We do need to talk about what everyone thinks is a better day and time for Zoom meetings. Could you raise your hand if you want to keep it on this day, or if you would rather have it on Saturday or during the week? We have one person keeping it on Sunday.
Well, no, I'm just as soon keep it on Sunday. You gave us 3 choices at once. We couldn't.
I know. So most of you would rather keep it on Sunday. How many of you would rather have it on a weekday evening? Oh, I think you're kind of outvoted, Nick. Is 2 o'clock still a good time, or would you rather have it later?
You know, I had to kind of rush to do it by 2 o'clock. A little bit later, maybe 3 would be better for me.
Be better? 4 o'clock be better?
Well, those of us on the West Coast.
Oh yeah, 3 o'clock would be lunch, yeah.
So would 3 o'clock be better? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Wait, what time?
For what?
Would 3 o'clock be better Eastern time?
Yes.
Well, for them, that's lunchtime on the West Coast. That's noon.
That's fine.
Well, you can even do it at 4 o'clock on Sunday Eastern time. Karen, would you like 4 o'clock Eastern time?
I liked it now. 2 o'clock was perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't want to vote because I felt like it was more important what worked for your region.
Well, I'm curious because at the next meeting we may have another region joining. So I'm just kind of curious what everyone's thinking. Why don't we keep it at 2 for the next meeting, Eastern time? And I'm going to throw out a date to everyone, but we will have an official announcement on our Facebook page. And Patty and I had chosen the date for July 13th, July 12th. July 12th. That's a Sunday at 2 o'clock. We didn't want to do it on July 4th weekend. It's the weekend after that.
Right.
That's the weekend of the Louisville Festival.
Oh, that's not going to work.
July 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Oh.
All right, another question. Should we do it in 2 weeks or should we do it in 5 weeks? Is 5 weeks too far away? Thumbs up or down?
I won't be here in 5 weeks, but that's just me.
You could join us from wherever you are, maybe. Nobody really cares if we do it in 2 weeks or 5 weeks. Is 2 weeks too soon?
Yeah. Because we'll need to work on a program.
Now, July 5th wouldn't be good, would it?
No, because that's the July 4th weekend. We can't do it
All
then.
right, then we're going to have to go to July 19th. That's in 5 weeks from today. And we had talked about some topics, Patty and I. We were thinking of maybe about talking about fathers in the novels. Does anyone like that idea? Would they rather talk about something else?
Good.
All right. All right. If anyone wants to lead any of these talks, certainly contact me through Facebook, or Patty and I are going to put that together, talking about fathers in her novels for July 19.
Great.
Okay, it was really nice meeting new faces. Thank you to everyone. Does anyone want to say anything before we close the meeting?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, to anyone
Thank you so much.
Thank you for welcoming us from the West Coast.
Yeah, same.
Join us anytime.
I'm gonna post. Yeah, I'm gonna post the recording to go. We have a YouTube channel. We just started a YouTube channel, so if you go to JASNA Palm Beaches on YouTube, and I will also try to get it posted to Facebook, on the Facebook page, JASNA Palm Beaches.
So anyone who joined the meeting late, you'll be able to see the meeting from the beginning. Thank you.
And thank you, Patty, for all the cards.
Thank you both.
Oh, you're welcome. You're
That was
welcome.
great. Yes. We'll distribute them.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.